It has just gone 1 o'clock. Can I just get an indication from Mr. Kutsia with regards to the live feed on YouTube? Or is IT ready for us to proceed with this meeting?
That is correct, Chairperson. I think they have been notified. We can proceed with the meeting. At present, we are a quorum. We've got Member America with us, as well as Member Dugmore and yourself. So we are a quorum. We may proceed with the meeting.
Thank you very much. Yes, it has gone 1 o'clock. The meeting is scheduled from 1 o'clock. So members, with your indulgence, I'm going to start the meeting. Good afternoon, everyone. Members, before I get to the rules of engagement, can I just ask that you introduce yourself for the record?
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Derek America. I'm a member of the committee.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm Cameron Dugmore, alternate on this committee.
Thank you very much, members. Just for the record, I have received an apology from Minister Madikizela, so I would like to table that apology up front. Members, with your indulgence and the department, if you would, my bandwidth is interrupting, so I'm going to switch off my camera for the duration of the meeting, if that's in order.
In order, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, before we get to the introduction of the officials, I just want to indicate that this meeting is called by using the MS Teams meeting, and that the proceedings are also being aired via live feed on YouTube, which any interested person, institution, stakeholder may tune in to follow such proceedings. I would like to request all guests on the MS Teams platform, except for those presenting in respect of the meeting agenda, that they are not allowed to interact or participate verbally without being requested to do so. If you need any technical assistance by the ICT staff, if you could please indicate that in the chat function on MS Teams, and the IT staff would assist you, members. All members will be muted at the beginning of the meeting to avoid any background noises. In case you need to flag my attention to anything or would like an opportunity to speak, to please also indicate that via the MS Teams functions. Can I please ask that all videos and audio please be switched off to improve the quality of the connection. However, if a member or an official would like to speak, that they may please then put on their microphone and video. Participants must please switch off your microphone once you have finished speaking. Unfortunately, there is no interpreting services available, and I would therefore request and appreciate if English could be used as a medium of communication. With that being said, members, welcome to the Standing Committee on Transport and Public Works. It is the 8th of September, and we will be dealing with the first quarterly performance report by the department, as well as getting a briefing on the Better Living model. I'm going to hand over to the officials. I don't know who's going to be taking the lead today from the department, but if that person can start, and then I will hand over to the rest of the officials. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chair and members. Just for the record, I'm our HOD extends her apology. She is on leave on a much deserved break. And I'm the acting head of department at the moment. We've prepared 2 presentations that have been forwarded to you. One presentation will be given by Mr. Gerrit van Schalkwyk, and the other presentation will be given by Mr. Pillay on the Conradi model. So without further ado, before I hand over to them, just to introduce myself, as I said, Kyle Reinecke. I am the DDG for Transport Management and acting head of department at the moment. With us at the moment, we have our DDG for Finance and CFO, Ms. Chantal Smith. We also have Mr. Gerrit van Schalkwyk, our DDG for Strategy. Mrs. Deidre Ribbenau, our Chief Director for Transport Operations.
My meeting just started now. Carl went to...
I can hear...
You're back now in the com.
Can I, my apologies for that interruption. Can I please ask IT to mute all background noises with the exception of the acting HOD?
Okay. Sorry, and then it was Ms. Deidre Ribbenau, the Chief Director for Transport Operations within the department, Mr. Farrell Payne, Acting Chief Director for Traffic Management, Mr. Len Fourie, DDG for Roads in our branch. We have Mr. Shane Hindley, he's the Chief Director within our Public Works section. Mr. Pillay is responsible for our Triple P, Mr. Yasir Ahmed. He's responsible for GMT and transport regulation. And then we have Mr. Neil Joseph, who is also in our Triple P department. I think I've mentioned everyone. If I've missed anyone, I'll just ask them to introduce themselves. Okay, Chair, that seems as if I've introduced the whole department, and then can I, without further ado, then pass on to, I think we're going to start off with the Conradi model. Is that correct?
Thank you, Advocate Reinecke. Before we get to the agenda, I've seen that Honourable Heron and Honourable van der Westhuizen has joined. So if I could just provide them with an opportunity to just introduce themselves just for the record.
Thank you, Chair. Brett Heron, member of the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Andrikus van der Westhuizen, also member of the committee.
Apologies, I'm struggling to unmute. Okay, thank you very much. According to the agenda, we will first deal with the quarterly report. I mean, I'm not, to me, it's either or first, but because the agenda has been published as such, I would need the agreement of the members to change the agenda around. Members, would that be in order that we first deal with the Conradi presentation?
Yes, Chair.
All right, so it doesn't seem like there's any objection, so we'll first deal with that presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Then we will, I will ask Mr. Pillay to put up the presentation and then start it.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Thank you, Acting Head of Department. Okay, we will now share the presentation, which I will take you through. Just to check if everyone can see the presentation at this point in time.
Yes, so we can see the presentation.
Okay, great. No, thank you, Chair. Okay, so the presentation that I will take you through is on the Conradi, the Better Living Model Exemplar Project, in short, the BLIMP. And the contents, we have about 15 items, but that shouldn't be a big deal. I mean, I could take you through all of them in the space of time. I'm not going to go through each of the content on this particular slide, but it's just a summary to give you a sense of the items that we have on the actual presentation. I need to go back to the game changers, which the Western Cape government had embarked upon in 2014, of which at the time the Premier Ellen Ziller had actually identified through her sort of cabinet. And one of the game changers was the Better Living Model, which was a joint sort of collaboration between the Western Cape government and the city of Cape Town. The project motivation at the point in this particular game changer was established and decided upon. It's in partnership with the city and the private sector, was to develop and implement a better living model exemplar on a well-located urban state land that will support positive social, economic and spatial integration that may be replicated into the future on other sites as well. This particular model actually is the live, work, play and learn sort of categories. And we sort of familiar with most of us would be familiar with this type of model, which is now starting to be a buzzword in the current circumstances as well. The Better Living Model seeks to redress the historical imbalance precipitated through the apartheid spatial planning legacies by enabling and making available well-located state land for affordable, integrated, residentially led development by the private sector that must optimize urban land use and create of a safe and vibrant live, work, play, learn environment for people close to public transport and sustainable work opportunities. This is an introduction. The Conradi, the former Conradi site, which is approximately 22 hectares in extent, was identified as a suitable location for this exemplar project, which will create affordable integrated housing opportunities close to the Cape Town CBD and transform the site into an integrated space where people can live, work, play and learn. The BLIMP is aimed at a mix of income ownership and tenure options that attracts a diverse cultural blend of people who choose to live within an affordable and secure environment integrated with work, play and learn opportunities. The target market includes grant-funded housing and open market housing, including the gap market. The site, for those that may not be too familiar, the Conradi property is located within the city of Cape Town, between the neighborhoods of Pinelands, Kensington, and Goodwood, Thornton, and Epping Industrial 1. There is a site sort of a location map on screen, which you could see bordered by the Jan Smuts Drive, Forest Drive on the north, and the Maitland further up on the Forest Drive end. The development concept, it's a residentially led mixed-use, mixed-income development incorporating open market and grant-funded social housing units, retail, service industry, office, sports and recreation, education and other facilities, recreation, sporting and water and stormwater attenuation open space system on the southern edge of the site, the upgrading of the Forest Drive extension to improve the access to the site and the surrounding area, connection to the Fuwa-Trekker Road over Forest Drive extension and the railway line through the Maitland Cemetery to the north. the adaptive reuse of the heritage structures as community facilities. What I must actually also mention there with the heritage, there is a hall and a few admin buildings which has to be restored, but still retained from an heritage point of view. Members, Chair, this particular project was culminated in an agreement signed between the developer, the Department of Transport and Public Works, and Human Settlements, which is referred to the Land Availability and Development Agreement, LADA in short, to deliver the BLIMP in terms of agreed key deliverables and development options. I've just highlighted some of the main ones. There's about approximately 11 main objectives, according to the LADA, that needs to be complied with. And the main ones are complying with the conditions of rezoning approval, deliver a minimum of 3,500 residential units, ensuring at least 49%, of which 1,715 units are grant-funded housing, comprising social housing and FLIS units. Construct at least 750 units, 49% housing and 51% open market in the first phase of the project. Comply with the Heritage Western Cape Record of Decision, provide new access road, gate and security kiosk for the Orthotics and Prosthetics Center, and deliver 2 independent schools affordable to the BLIMP target residents, which together are able to accommodate a minimum of 1,600 scholars, with at least one able to accommodate 800 scholars and available on or before the completion of the 1,200 residential units. To give you a sense of the timing and the high-level deliverables, the milestones on your left and the projected dates, and some of them completed. Commencement dates, January 2019. First school to be completed is scheduled for January 2022. The 750 residential units to be completed, estimate projected for April 2022. The retail space, June 2022. The remainder of the social housing units, August 2023. The second school to be completed, January 2024. Remainder of the FLIS to be completed, August 2024. Remainder of the open market units, March 2026. Commercial, March 2026. And in the end, the completing all the requirements or commitments for the LADA by March 2026. Chair, it's important just to note the work that need to go into this project, and for the members to understand that before one actually breaks ground, there's a fair amount and intense work that needs to sort of take place and have taken place in order that we can get, or the developer will be in a position to start actually building. So in October 2018, that's the date when the formal award was made to CONCO by the department. In October 2018, the LADA was signed by all the parties. January 2019, the formal sword turning ceremony took place, and dignitaries, including the Premier of the Western Cape and Mayor of Cape Town, were also on site. April 2019, CONCO formally took control of the site, including all security and maintenance responsibilities. June 2019, CONCO receives the first grant funding payment from the Western Cape government for infrastructure work done on Conradi Park. Conradi Park is the name that has been given to this particular development, so you would see that coming up as well. CONCO then submits the Precinct 1 plan to the department for review and comment. Chair and members, just to actually note that the site has been divided into 2 precincts, Precinct 1, Precinct 2. The process that follows is that before the developer can submit to the City of Cape Town, there is a review process together with the contract manager and his team to ensure that it complies with what was originally agreed by with the developer or through the actual rezoning application, and there's no real deviation from that, and then it's submitted to the city for final approval. July 2019, the CONCO submits Precinct 1 plan to the city after the sign-off by the department, by the Western Cape government. September 2019, Concourse submits a site development plan for the first social housing block to the City of Cape Town, which is comprised of 432 units. Chair and members, just to actually mention here, there is a set process that needs to follow. It's referred to as the package of plans. We have done a high level and a quite a comprehensive, what we call a framework, a development framework. Thereafter, there is a precinct plan. Thereafter, there is a site development plan, and then their building plan follows. So we've got to go through those 3 steps of precinct, site development, building plans, and get the necessary approvals prior to the construction starting taking place on the ground. Conco then in September 2019 submits the formal social housing funding application to the Social Housing Regulatory Authority, the SHRA. This is required because that funding, or the grant funding for the social housing part of it, is actually managed by the SHRA. They need to make a formal application to ensure that all the terms and conditions are satisfying before any sort of release of funds, and the approval has been obtained upfront prior to construction. September 2019, Concourse submits the SDP 2 for the first open market housing block to the Western Cape, which comprises of 106 units. Okay, continuing with the current progress, in November 2019, the City of Cape Town approved the SDP 1 for the 432 social housing units. In November 2019, Concourse submits the SDP 3 to the Western Cape Government, consisting of 288 FLISP units. The Condradi Park site, which the developer has actually has constructed and went live in December 2019. Concourse in December as well submitted the building plan application for the first 432 social housing units to the City of Cape Town. In December as well, City of Cape Town approves the precinct plan of the development. December as well, City of Cape Town approves the last internal bulk infrastructure upgrade designs and external road and bridge upgrades. Chair and members, I need to also stress here that this is a barren piece of ground which needed to be developed and all services to be put in, and this is what the developer would actually be responsible for as well. December 24th, the City of Cape Town, that is the Land Use Management Submissions Unit, approves the first 4 social housing blocks. That's the 432. January 2020, civil contractor establishes on site and starts the site clearance, pipe diversions, and piling for new pedestrian bridges. February 2020, there was the VIP launch of the first open market residential units at the Condradi Park, and the public launch of the open market residential units in Feb 2020 as well. In fact, March 2020, we then get to the current state of this year. President announces the 21-day nationwide lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. Construction on site was altered to comply with the lockdown regulations. May 2020, construction work commences after COVID-19 lockdown status of the level 4, and on June 1st, construction of substations and pump stations commenced as well. In fact, just in summary, to give you a sense of all of that, let's take the social housing, the first block of 432 units. The site development plan has been approved, the building plans have been approved, SHRA financial closure has been achieved. That is, we've got confirmation that funding will be made available to the Social Housing Institute for the social housing grant, that funding that's available, and construction commences in September 2020. For the FLISP residential part of the development, the first building, which is 288 units, site development plan approved, building plan submitted, currently waiting for the process of approval, and the sales for this particular type of units will commence in September as well. On the open market residential, the first building of 106 units, the site development plan has been approved, the building plans have been submitted, sales are currently in progress. However, I must also mention that this was affected by the advent of COVID-19, and of course with the resulting impact of the economic impact of the pandemic as well. Moving on to the funding part, where the Western Cape government and the City of Cape Town have come into the party. Funding has been secured from the Department of Transport and Public Work. That's for the enablement and the contract management of this project, and from the Department of Human Settlements for the implementation, the HSDG and own reserves. The Department of Human Settlements funds required beyond the current the MTF period have been successfully secured in terms of a PFMA Section 16 application, which was signed by the MEC in March 2018. The City of Cape Town has allocated 221 million USDG funding to the project for bulk services and 55 million for electrical services over a 6-year period, starting in the 2018-2019 financial year. The Department of Human Settlement and the City of Cape Town have signed off against a memorandum of agreement governing the use of the allocated USDG funds. Chair and members, just to give you a sense of spending to date from the commencement of the project, if we look at the 2018-2019 financial year, the original budget, revised budget of 7506, the spending was 7506. Going into the financial year 2019-2020, we had original budget of 5 million. We had that was revised to 53.494, and the spend against that revised budget was 53.562 million. So the current budget is still work in progress. So the 2021, we have a revised budget of 135.124 for the USDG bulk services. On the USDG electric services, we have in the financial the financial years that we are referring to here is this financial year for the City of Cape Town, because this is the grant that comes through from them. So it actually differs from what we, from a province point of view, actually with a cutoff on 31st of March, they would be on the 30th of June. So if you look at the 2019-2020 year, the revised from the original budget 18.972, the revised was 36.438, and the spend against that revised budget was 32.471 million. The current budget, or the revised budget for the 2021 financial year, is 19.188 million. Okay, from the DHS grant, the DHS, the Department of Human Settlements have made available over 118 million, and the 2021 financial years, the budget of 78.22, of which 24.087 million has been spent. Chair, then we go on to some of the risks that we needed to just highlight, which actually has been a risk that was also put forth by the developer as well. The first one, which we've categorized this in the status being either medium or high. The first one is the obtaining of the FLISP, the IRDP funding, and this infrastructure reconciliation development funding for the FLISP houses units. The bulk infrastructure scope changes, which is also medium in the medium category, the private independent schools pricing in the medium category. The three issues or risks that have been identified to be in the high category are the tax implications on the transfer of ownership of completed units, the aerodrome bridge, and the COVID-19 pandemic impact on sale of units. Chair, this particular slide deals with the high level, the high level or the high category, or the categorized risks that I've just alluded to on the previous slide. So if we go on to the tax issues, and to make this very simplified, it's government is actually a non-tax vendor. However, if there is a transfer of land or properties over to a party which is a VAT vendor, there is a problem. There is a challenge with the transfer duties which has to be levied, so which impacts on the price, on the final price to the end user. So that, in a nutshell, is that particular situation. This current issue is currently being deliberated upon some tax experts and with the developer. So we are exploring, both the developer and the department are exploring possible solutions to this current challenge that we have. On the aerodrome bridge servitude acquisition, the condition of the rezoning approval was that the aerodrome road extension shall be constructed from the Forest Bridge Drive extension to the Voortrekker Road over the Maitland Cemetery. The process requires a servitude on a property which is first on forest property. The city has formed a task team to facilitate the acquisition of the land for the servitude as required from first on forest. And there was a delay in the acquisition of the land for the servitude, and this could possibly delay a bit on the delivery on the project as per the LADA agreement, as per the LADA and the rezoning approval, as the total bulk that was approved may not be accessed at this point in time until that current challenge has been overcome. So there is a task team, there are regular sort of meetings being held, and we, together with the developer, are involved with the contract manager from the department. So at this point, we feel that, okay, this is being addressed. The city knows the priority of this to actually make this happen, and there's work currently being steady progress on this. The long-term effects of COVID-19, the lockdown has delayed the completion of the civil works and the commencement of the construction of the first social housing buildings. It has also resulted in a major slowdown in open market residential sales, and the full impact of this will only become more apparent over time. What I need to say, okay, let me do that in the next slide. Okay, on the impact of the COVID-19, the civil works delayed from 26 March to 7th of 2020 to 7th May 2020. No effect on the overall project delivery other than a slowdown of the grant funding spend. Now, just to elaborate on that, what we're trying to say here that in the current plans or the deliverable schedule for the developer, there was a float of approximately 55 days. Due to the COVID sort of delay, due to the advent of COVID-19, the pandemic, there has been a loss of about approximately 49 days plus minus. So right now we are virtually on par, not we, but the developer. So this is what we are trying to say. There's no effect on the overall project delivery. So any further delays here henceforth could then start to impact on the delivery date as well. Building construction started on the social housing has been delayed due to the delays in the finalization of the SHRA process due to lockdown. So there is a fairly intensive process that one needs to go through to get the SHRA funding sorted and approved. There is an application which gets reviewed, and there's to and froing from the SHRA, the institution back to the National Department of Housing. So this sort of application was delayed due to time lost on the COVID-19 impact as well. COVID-19 also had an major impact on the pace and volume of sales of the market residential units. The full effect is still unknown and will be driven by the economic fallout of the pandemic. Chair, we need to also mention that, we cannot fool ourselves. This has an impact on certain prospective buyers. A few of them may have lost their jobs, sales were cancelled, but at this point there is still that uncertainty in the economy, and this and sales have actually not been going at the pace that the developer has envisaged according to their plan. Chair and members, I thought it will be good to share some of the photographs or aerial photos that have been taken. On a monthly basis, the developer sends through a drone to take sort of snapshots of progress on site, and we are sharing some of that now with the members and with you, Chair. So the first one is the actual site as it stands now, with just the groundwork that has been sort of done. The next one, okay, the first one was in March. The next one is in May 2020. And hopefully you could see there's improvements on the ground and earthworks that is currently taking place. Then we move on to the next one, which is a photo of the June progress as of June. And here we actually give you an indication of what some of the areas where retail spaces, the platform for the first 4 social housing buildings, the platform for the schools, the heritage part of the site, which needs to be retained and refurbished in some parts, and the formation of the construction platforms for FLISP. July, the following is a shot of current progress, which shows the school site, the rental units, the laying down of curbs, tunnels for internal roads, a sewer pump station, and the shaping ponds and parks along the canal. But hopefully this will give you some sense, but of course the site and our site visit is always available or on the offering whenever that is, when the opportunity arises. August 2020, this is what it's now, this is how it looked at August 2020. There's a fair amount of progress, and I think it shows that the developer is serious in getting things happening. It's not in his best interest for the size or magnitude of this quantum of investment to delay, so they are quite working feverishly on site as well. In fact. Okay, the next photo on this shows some the substations nearing completion. Can't say much, but just from the side of from the snapshot, from the photos, you could see that there has been progress on that as well. The next two photos depict the sewer pump station walls and work that has been done on the Oden Bridge. That is also part of the deliverable or requirement as a condition in the LADA as well, in fact. And finally, the two photos that you see there is the Old Mutual, the NMT, that's the non-motor transport bridge abutments, and the requirement for the Jan Smuts Drive road upgrades, which has commenced as well, which is on the right side. Chair, from me, that's all for me for the presentation. I'll hand it back to you now, Chair.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Members, there's an echo. If the echo can just be switched off in the background. Members, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow each one of you an opportunity to pose your questions. With your indulgence and in the interest of fairness, can I please ask that you limit your questions to 3 in round 1. If there's any additional new questions, there will be around 2. After round 1, I will give you an opportunity to do any follow-up questions. So if you're in agreement, if we could follow that line of questioning in order to make sure that we stick to our time to have this meeting concluded by 4 o'clock. We have another presentation as well. All right, so I see Honourable America, Honourable Dugmore, and Honourable van der Westhuizen in that order, and then Honourable Heron. Honourable America.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Honourable America, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Belay, for the presentation. It was sort of fairly enlightening. My questions I'd like to pose for a response is that, one, in the slides you state that 51% of the housing units will be available on the open market. And further down the presentation, you mentioned that the sales for those houses, I presume, are in progress. The question that I'd like to pose, because firstly, one, it is not generally known that the sales process is in progress and people could possibly, enter into possible sales agreement. But the more important question I'd like to respond is, because it's such a well-located site with fairly decent and modern amenities that will be created, what mechanisms are in place to prevent the open market units are subject to people with deep pockets, speculation, that people who need to access those housing opportunities are ultimately not rich. And then the second question, Chair, is that mention is made of 2 independent schools, private schools. Why is it a government-private partnership cooperation, or is it simply just going to be an independent school? Because as part of the risk that was mentioned later on in the slide towards the end, is that the pricing of the independent school may pose a particular financial risk to the inhabitants of the area, because we know we create opportunities for people who are not very rich, who will be living there, and them being subject to schools in the area, but unfortunately it might just become unaffordable for them to send the schools there. And then lastly, Chair, is that as far as the spending is concerned, it is quite noticeable that the budgeted spending over a number of years happen to be depleted, before those outer years have been reached. Is it a result of superior delivery, that the infrastructure development is ahead, or is it perhaps any other reason that may give rise to the depletion of the budget before the stated timelines that as was presented? Thank you, Chair. That's all for me.
Thank you, Honourable America. Honourable Dagmore.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, the first one has been touched on by Member America, but I would just like to ask for an explanation as to why the decision was not made for public schools in the area. I think everyone is aware that generally there's pressure on education provisioning in the Pinelands area, and I would just like to ask, what was the reason? Did the Education Department formally indicate an unwillingness to take up the opportunity, or was that opportunity never directly offered to them? And I also just want to get an explanation here. Are we talking about a primary school and a high school? And if so, what is the process that will be followed to find a provider of these 2 schools? But the main issue and the main concern is around the issue of why a decision was made that these should not be public facilities. And then secondly, I would like to get a response to how much, from the planning stages right up to the current has been spent on consultants. I would like to get that response. And what is the expected expenditure by government, all told? What is the projected amount that budget from the provincial government as well as the city will be spent on this project? How much investment is the developer actually making in this regard in terms of the infrastructure that is required? So what is the contribution of the private partner in this? And then if you could just finally clarify the units that we're talking about from the slides. I've gathered 432 social housing, 288 FLISP, and then is it only 106 open market units, or are there going to be more in latter phases? Those are my questions for now, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Doug Moore. Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, my questions are mostly regarding the open market units. Can I just ask, firstly, what is meant by open market? Is it really open market, or are there some regulations in place to avoid things like speculation, etc.? The second question is, what is the price range of those units that are going on the open market? And what are the current signs? Do you believe that the demand for those houses is sufficient? Also then, for the buyers, what are the conditions that they must meet in order to qualify? Must it be like first-time homeowners? Must they have been Capetonians for a while? Must they be working people? Can pensioners also qualify? Just if we could just be informed regarding that. And then also in terms of what is then required from the purchasers in terms of the deposits for those houses. When must they put it down, and when would they be able then to take occupation of those houses? And if you could just give us an indication of what income bracket is being catered for. And then lastly, what is the value of the land? Because I assume that this is a subsidized scheme whereby the land is part of the donation to ease home ownership and to encourage and support home ownership. So if you could just give us an indication of how much the benefit would be for the homeowners in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Honourable Heron.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is about the social housing and whether there is a social housing partner or whether Concor is going to be developing and operating and managing the social housing component. And then I would like to ask about, and I've asked this before in the committee, I don't think we ever actually received the presentation, about the replicability of this model. I read a report, it was either from National Treasury or from the City Support Programme, where there were concerns raised around the financial viability of the scheme and whether it was replicable. And I wonder if those concerns have been addressed, and if we can get some indication on whether this model can be replicated elsewhere. And maybe that's a whole separate presentation, I'm not sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Heron. Mr. Pillay, I'm going to hand over back to you. Advocate Reineke, I don't know between who's going to take the lead in answering, but I'll leave it up to you.
Thank you, Chair. These questions, I think, will be answered by Mr. Pillay himself.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Okay, let me start off with the Honourable Member Heron. It's always easier to start from the end. The social housing partner here, Chair, through you, it's not Concor themselves, but there's a social partner. That's an institute. It's Hone Haven. They are the social housing institute that is taking responsibility and ownership of the social housing development. On the replicability of this project, I don't think I could answer that just yet, but all I could say that, there is a good, sorry, I don't know if the Honourable Member has, okay. I would think that would need to be taken at another, on a different forum, and the viability of this and concerns, it will actually be, it will depend totally on the site, the size of it, and what can be actually accomplished within that sort of realm of the extent and the site that one is talking about. And of course, what will also be important from a financial viability is, what services are available and what are not. And that's also one of the big sort of big deal breakers from a viability point of view. I can then move on to the Honourable Member through you, Chair van der Westhuizen. The open market units, these are the issue on the open market units. Chair, I need to mention that we do not prescribe to the developer on how he needs to actually market what in the conditions that he puts down to who can actually purchase and who cannot, and all of those sort of conditions or criteria. It is for the developer to actually do that on his own accord, because that's his own marketing strategy, but we assist whenever we can in some way, but it's merely not putting any stipulation, this is what is required. The price range in the open market, and I just need to, from memory, and I may be wrong, but I recall it sort of ranging from about 1.5 to about 2.5 million, and it depends on whether it's a one bedroom, or 1.5, or a 2-bedroom unit as well. The open market, the current demand, Chair, there was a launch of the open market, and at that launch, this was pre-COVID, there was a fair, well, not fair, but according to the developer, they did get a fairly good response. And the indications are that it's approximately at this point, 25% of the open market sales but 25% of these units have been signed up. But according to their numbers or their projections, it's actually below what they would like to have seen. And that too is actually the COVID the problem with COVID as well. Conditions, I did talk about what are the conditions. We don't actually prescribe anything in that nature, and it's not in the LADA. That's totally what the developer would actually go with. What is required by deposits, and that as well, we don't actually get involved. Remember that all of this is with the developer themselves, so that the department does not get involved, and we actually are not yet informed unless we ask them what deposits are actually coming through as well, in fact. Now, the question from the Honourable Member van der Westhuizen was on the income brackets. Chair, I could say that the income brackets, and I'm not sure whether I misunderstood this, whether it's just open market or the open market is beyond the social housing and the FLISP, and the open market is the market that whereupon an individual or a prospective buyer is able to actually purchase the unit outright and be able to obtain a bond directly with a financial institution and meets those sort of requirements. On the social market units, the earnings are from about 1.5 thousand per month to 3,500, from 3,500 to 5,500, and on the secondary targets that actually goes up from 5.5 to 7.5, 7.5 to 11.3, and 11,300 to about 15,000 a month. The value of the land and donations, that has been factored into the whole project as such. When we put this out, we'd actually required the developer to put forth a residual land value that would be offered to the department, to the Western Cape government, and that offer was made by the particular Concor, which is in the region of 200 million. How much benefit to homeowners? I'm not sure the benefit, but what I'm saying is the understanding of that, the benefit to the homeowners, there's a fair amount of subsidy that in grant funding that government has actually put forth on this. If you look at the slide that talks to the various budget spend, on that there alone, you can see there's about 394 million that is being put forth from the USDG, bulk services, the electrical, and from the DHS grant. And there's also a social housing grant that comes through for top structures, which is in the region of about 349.5 thousand per unit. So that is the benefit from, that is what government actually puts forth into this particular development as well. In fact. Chair, if I can move on to the Honourable Member Dugbo, why the decision for public schools in the area by the Western Cape government? Chair, I must say up front that we've had a fair amount of engagement with the Department of Education. In September 2018, we had got a letter a letter that was sent through by the department, the head of the senior official from the department, whereby they had set out that they were unable to actually provide on-site and the Conradi site public schools. But they did go on to say, and if I read from their correspondence, that the Western Cape government indeed has stated Western Cape Education Department has stated that there is provision of expansion in the area and has identified a number of schools that might benefit from the program. The following primary schools could potentially be the beneficiaries of the expansion classroom program, one being the Pinelands Primary, 2 the Pinelands and North Primary School, the Pinehurst Primary School, and the Taunton Primary School. So the Western Cape Department of Education had also gone forth and sort of mentioned as well on the comments on the rezoning application that the 2 independent schools that would be provided could the developer should look at exploring alternative means of funding education pilot projects such that public-private partnerships how can public-private partnerships can best operate in these current circumstances. The Education Department further goes on to say, as part of the comments to the rezoning application, that the Western Cape cannot prescribe the fee structures of private schools, but the opportunity does exist to apply to the Western Cape Education Department for funding to augment school fees. Then the issue of Chair on how much planning and the costs from spent. Unfortunately, I do not have those numbers at this point in time of the fingertips. So if the member is fine through you, Chair, that we could provide the numbers of the planning to completion spent on consultants, the project budget to be spent by the province and City of Cape Town, although I must say that the projected budget that to be spent is also on that slide that I referred to earlier on slide 16, which talks to the budgeted expenditure or the budget for the project as well. And how much is the private sector willing to fund? That, unfortunately, we won't have privy to that because from a developer point of view, we do not interrogate how much is the developer putting into the project and how much of their funding, but we are well aware of what government is putting in here. The point that the honourable member brought up in the units only, what I need to mention, that is only phase 1. So the 108 that the honourable member has referred to is only in that particular phase, on 106. So it's not complete, not fate of complete. And if you look at the deliverables, the high-level deliverables on the slide 10, you would see that the remainder of the open markets completed in March 2026. And then I'm moving on to the Honourable Member America. 51% open sales in progress, well-located site. What mechanisms are in place to prevent open markets abuse and big pockets and not enriching themselves? Chair, through you as well. Unfortunately, we do not actually stipulate what needs to be done, but we can actually make the developer aware that this could be a problem and a challenge, and they need to actually have some sort of mechanism in place. But we cannot prescribe to them how this needs to be addressed. On the 2 independent schools, I did talk about that, the pricing of the individual schools and the inhabitants' risk. It's been highlighted as a medium risk, and I must say that yes, that is always going to be a challenge, but the developer is well aware of that. Prior to us going out on the formal tender, we did actually put out a market survey, a market questionnaire. It's a market engagement questionnaire, and the private school issue also was put in, and we had not got any sort of responses that gave us the contrary to what we actually envisaged as well. The situation about spending the budget over a number of years before completed, this would not be possible if the project has been the project or the LADA has been signed on the basis that there is a set amount that will be allocated from a grant funding point of view. So over and above that, they will have to absorb anything additional. So that would not be there would not be anything from government coming out over and above that. Chair, hopefully I've covered most of that, and hopefully I've covered all of the questions. I'll hand it back to you now, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pillay. Honourable Dugmore and Heron, I see your hands are still up. If you could please just lower them. so that I can just give an opportunity to members that have follow-up questions. Members, if you have any follow-up question in round 1, if you could please indicate to me. I see Honourable America, Honourable Dugmore, and Honourable Heron. Honourable Dugmore, your hand was up and then dropped. Do you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I just wanted to...
No. I'm not giving you an opportunity. I'm asking, do you have a follow-up question?
I do.
Okay, so Honourable America, Honourable Heron, Honourable Dugmore, Honourable van der Westhuizen, in that order.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Pillay, for the response to my question raised. Just a follow-up. In terms of the proposed open schools, and with this COVID pandemic that we've all experienced and still experiencing, it is fairly known that independent schools face financial pressures due to people having lost their jobs, being on short time, etc. Now, when we speak about private development, like to ask firstly, who are the financiers of those particular schools, and if the which consortiums were approached to develop those schools, and if they through market research and the experience of this COVID pandemic come to the realization that it may not be financially feasible to proceed with the development, what will happen then? And then, yeah, that's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable America. Honourable Heron.
Thanks, Chair. I think my question was partially answered about the replicability, but I mean, obviously the financial viability would apply to any project. And I think we do need to understand whether this is a once-off model or whether it can be replicated elsewhere, and whether there can be greater integration of different income groups in one development, which I think would be something we should support. I think part of the problem is the massive draw against USDG that this project required in order to make it financially viable, and USDG is not available outside of metros. So I don't know if Mr. Pillay can answer this, but I would like us to get to the point where we understand whether this model is replicable, what the role of USDG is in making it replicable, and outside of the metros, how does it become implementable without USDG? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Heron. Honourable Dugmore.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I just wanted to ask that, when I requested information about what the developer is actually contributing, Mr. Pillay indicated that he's not able to provide that. I just want to get clarity. This is obviously a PPP, but he mentioned an amount of 200 million in terms of, as I understood it, gaining access to the land. So, but the real question I want to ask is, could we, if not now, be provided with later exactly what as a part of this public-private partnership, this particular developer is actually bringing to the table in rands and cents? Obviously, units are being built. There's going to be sales, there's subsidies being accessed, but surely we can provide the committee with what exactly is the developer contributing to this development. What is their financial commitment to this? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Heron. Honourable van der Westhuizen. Honourable van der Westhuizen, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. My apologies. Chair, I don't know if I missed it, but can we get an indication of the intended completion date And again, my question regarding on the open market, those houses being paid for, signed for now, how long will you have to wait? I presume you must pay your deposit or must submit guarantees. If we could just get some more information regarding that. And did I hear correctly that there's no anti-speculation clauses or anything like that? If one person wants to buy 20 of those units, if he or she could afford it, the open market in this case is really, really open market.
Thank you, members. Mr. Pillay, I'm handing back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, let me upfront mention, and I think there might be some confusion. I want to just firstly go through the point that Honourable Dugmore brought up. This is not a public-private partnership. This is an agreement. The agreement that is being concluded is a land availability development agreement. Totally, it's not as envisaged in or it's not the same as a public-private partnership. So what they bring in here is basically the shortfall in funding that is required for any of the housing units, be it the FLISP or the social housing. There is a shortfall out there, and their contribution, but their offer to the Western Cape government was 200 million for the development and the use and the land that has been made available. Plus, there's that is what it is. So it's not a public-private partnership. The agreement concluded is a land availability development agreement that kicks in as and when units are sold, that land is transferred accordingly, and the contribution or the amount that is paid from the 200 is based on the open market units alone. Chair,
thank you, Mr. Pillay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Chair, then if I can move on to the Honourable Member van der Westhuizen, the intended completion date of the, I'm not sure if it's the old project or just the open market units. Open market units is around 2022, and the total for the old project as such is around 2026. The question also was raised by the Honourable Member van der Westhuizen on guarantees, deposits and anti-speculation. So I must say up front that we do not conclude any agreements with the purchaser. The agreement is concluded between the developer and the party that is, although we are privy to that. We actually sign over, but we will actually review that if there is any condition that we feel that needs to be put in. But at the end of the day, we did not stipulate to them that there should be these sort of clause. If for some reason that one feels strongly that needs to be done, I don't think on a guarantee and a deposit, but definitely on the anti-speculation, that could be something that we could actually think about. But we just act as an agent, and then the end user from there completes it on together with the developer themselves. In fact. Then on the point around the point raised by the Honourable Member Heron, financial viability, can it be replicated? And the financial viability, so you will also be well aware that it requires a fair amount of number crunching. It depends on what type of unit you're going to put in out there, and how could you cross-subsidize certain units that are not going to be not profitable, but has a shortfall in funding. The USDG has certain the USDG funding and the social DHL, the funding for the social housing units, there is a shortfall as well. I had earlier alluded to the point that the social housing grant is approximately 349.5 thousand per unit, but I know according to my memory, and if it serves me right, the cost of setting up this or completing a social housing unit is anywhere in the region of 433 to 450. So there are shortfalls out there. Then you have the FLIPS, which is not totally funded, and then you have the open market, which is then what the developer will have to take the risk on that particular one. Chair, then we move on to the Honourable Member America, okay, the different income groups and the massive, whether this could be replicable. Chair, it's not an easy question, but I'm also saying there are also for courses depending on the type of, what sort of access to services that a particular site would have. That plays a major role, because for the Conradi site, which is a barren piece of ground, which services had to be put in, this is quite a big cost. In fact, it's a significant amount of investment, and that is probably why one needs to be mindful of the fact that when you talk of replicating it outside the CB or the city of Cape Town and other metro, outside the metro, that would be an important point to consider. Without the USDG, then we need to look at how can public-private partnerships could be considered as a procurement model, possibly. I mean, I'm talking from, because I can talk on a public-private partnership. How could that model be considered if there's no USDG funding? Because a fair amount of money then has to be put in by the private party as well, in fact. Chair, moving on to the Honourable Member America, the open schools and the COVID, the private development, the financiers of these schools, and who have they been talking to? This is from the discussions. I mean, we have regular sort of meetings and steering meetings and contract management meetings with the developer on a regular basis, monthly to be regular, and twice and any fortnight there's other meetings with the contract manager and the developer. They have indicated they have been talking to certain big players, and to mention one which is quite, well known, it's the Curo. And with the economic situation, there's some sort of mention by Curo that they are looking at a change in the business model, but they have not yet discounted their intention to come up onto the site to actually look at developing and taking up space out there. So yes, they are actually talking to some of the big players. The financiers for these schools, that unfortunately we may not be privy to that information, but it will be these, once we do have indication of who the particular private school provider would be, we could actually ask the question, who are funding them and the financiers from that point of view. If that cannot be achieved, there's certain protocols in the ladder that one could follow, but God forbid it doesn't get to a point where it goes through a full-blown dispute mechanism. But there are discussions and discussions that is allowed between the parties that have concluded on this agreement to take forward and actually understand what the predicament is and how best then the solution can be actually decided upon. Chair, hopefully I've covered that part of it, Chair.
Right, thank you, Mr. Pillay. Members, I'm now going to allow a second round of new questions. If you have, can I just get an indication, Honourable Van der Westhuizen, and if you can just drop or lower your hand. If there's a second, if there are new questions, members, if you can now raise your hand. I see Honourable America. Is it only Honourable America for round 2? All right, in that case, Honourable America.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Pillay, for the response. Just a quick one, Chair. Have we made any provision for ECDs within the development? Because I can well imagine a number of young families will move in there, and there may be a need for such a facility. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable America. Members, before I hand over to Mr. Pillay, last opportunity. Right, no indication. Mr. Pillay, over to you.
Chair, it's a valid point for the early childhood development. At this point in time, there's no specific provision, but this could be a point of discussion in that provision of schools, whether that's a possibility. But at this point, that has not been provided as such.
Right, thank you very much, Honourable America. Do you have any follow-up questions?
It's fine with me, Chair. I just wanted to know whether in the current agreement there's any provisions made. Thank you.
All right, thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. Pillay. Advocate Reineke, we will now move over to the second presentation by Mr. van Schalkwyk.
Yes.
I'm told.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mr. van Schalkwyk will give the second presentation.
Good afternoon, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable members. If you allow me just a few seconds to see if I can share my screen. And then to just indicate to me if it does show.
We can see the presentation, but it's not in presentation mode. If you could just in that setting.
Honourable Chairperson, I have no idea how to do that.
All right. Before we go into the technicalities of it, members, are you happy with the presentation as it is displayed?
Chair, it's a bit small. Can I propose that he clicks on that thing which looks like a screen right next to the magnifying glass at the bottom?
No. Sorry,
right.
apologies.
Can I
screen? Apologies for that.
Mr. van Schalkwyk, just give me 1 second. Mr. Coetzee, are you able to flight the presentation?
Chairperson, let me just see quickly if I've got it. Chairperson, is it visible?
It's visible on my side. I don't think that it's also in presentation mode.
Yeah,
members, could we continue? And while Mr. Coetzee is trying to put it onto presentation mode, or the presentation was emailed to all members. So, Mr. Coetzee, if you could manage the presentation, and Mr. van Schalkwyk, if you can take us through it. Thank you. And just give an indication to Mr. Coetzee when you are ready for the slide to be moved.
I will do so, certainly, Honourable Chairperson, and again, my apologies, sincerely. Honourable Chairperson, the presentation is around a first quarter performance report for 2020-2021. And the first two slides just really provide context, and members should be very familiar with those two slides. The one on the screen at the moment provides the outlay of the programs and the various functions, and the next slide provides the overall performance information context, and in the manner in which we reflect on it in these presentations is to highlight those areas where overachievement happened and where underachievement happened. The next slide covers the overall performance context and reflects both negative and positives. And on the negative side, we would have seen that there's a growing demand for services, but our input costs have increased, and I will reflect on that a little bit in the preceding slides. There has been a delay in reporting performance from institutions, and you will see that reflecting in some of the programs, and honourable members would recall when we presented our fourth quarter performance results, we had a similar challenge in the latter part of the fourth quarter. Overall, the constraints within which we are operating as a department are increasing. On the positive side, we are still spending very close to 100% of our budget. I think it's 99.9% or 99.8%. Essential services are being rendered, and we've received our 7th consecutive clean audit. Now, I think if we can move to the next slide. It's important that when we present on performance, we create a continuum between what we presented to the committee in May, which was the special sitting on COVID-19, and how COVID-19 impacted on the performance of the department, as well as our fourth quarter performance, as some of these matters have been pulled into quarter one and most probably will actually pull into quarter two and beyond as well. That cause and effect is still playing itself out. So prior to South Africa facing the COVID pandemic, global supply chain systems were already impacted upon negatively. We're seeing normal channels were disrupted as countries where the virus was already having a foothold started to close their borders.
Mr. van Schalkwyk, it seems like we've lost you. Members, can you hear me?
Yes, Chair. I'm just checking with Mr. van Schalkwyk what happened. If you just bear with me, please.
Sure, no problem. Mr. Gutsia, the screen keeps keeps jumping. If you could just have a look at that.
I'll pick it up. I'm not quite sure what it does.
Can you move one? Can you move the slide forward to the next slide and see if it does the same? There we go. Okay.
I will just go look at our generator. I think I might be running out of petrol, maybe. Check.
Are you or the generator running out of petrol?
No, load shedding today, Johan.
Members, with your agreement, could I ask that we suspend the meeting for 5 minutes to be back at 14:26 to allow Advocate Reineke just to make sure that we get Mr. van Schalkwyk back on the line?
Goeie voorstel.
All right.
Thank you, Chair. We're trying to get hold of him.
All right, so just for the record, this meeting is now suspended and will resume at 14:26.
Mike.
Gerard, can you just give me an indication that you're on and you can hear everything?
Honourable Chairperson, my sincerest apologies.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. The meeting has been suspended until 14:26 to afford us an opportunity to get you Zoom in 3 minutes.
We've had a catastrophic failure somewhere with towers. Vodacom, Wi-Fi, everything's off.
Dagmore,
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Honourable America. Honourable America.
Maak nog koffie.
All right, we are a quorum and it has gone 14:26. So just for the record, it has gone 14:26 and the Standing Committee on Transport and Public Works will now resume. Mr. Van Schalkwyk, I'm going to hand back over to you.
Honourable Chairperson, honourable members, my sincerest apologies. Despite our best efforts, me being completely off the grid, we had a massive power surge, and I think some of our towers have been badly affected, both internet as well as cellular, but we seem to be up and running again. We were on the slide on the transmission mechanisms that inform our context. What I wanted to point out was that we had a situation where the global supply chain system was impacted upon negatively. That transmitted into us obtaining, for example, not certain lifts that were coming from China, impacting on our health infrastructure program, that some of these disruptions have been resolved, but some have not, and they continue. New supply routes have been found, and new market systems have been put in place. But all of this has come with a time and a cost factor. So some of this disruption might continue beyond the short to medium term. And it's not clear at this stage whether there will be a return to the traditional distribution system. Cost across the board has increased. And if we can go to the next slide, please. What we've seen is with the lockdown regime that South Africa then followed, it's important that we place that lockdown regime into a context. So On the 5th of March, Minister Mkhize confirmed the spread of the virus in South Africa. On the 15th, President Ramaphosa declared a national state of disaster and announced measures such as immediate travel restrictions and the closure of schools as of from 18th of March. And of course, on the 23rd of March, we went into a national lockdown, level 5, starting on 26th of March. Now, all of that, of course, has had a tremendous impact on the operations of the department. That hard lockdown paused basically construction. On the 1st of May 2020, we lowered national alert level 4. And of course, while we have done that, certain parts of the construction industry was restarted, but under very strict regulatory conditions. Various measures had to be put in place, so it wasn't the automatic 1st of May start. Even for those that was allowed to start, you had to put workplace plans in place, you had to put risk plans in place and mitigate to the extent absolutely possible the spread of the virus at workplace. From the 1st of June, national restrictions were lowered to level 3, allowing a broader resume of construction to resume, but again, still under strict safety protocols. So all of this has impacted on how the department operates. And of course, we've seen that through the various mechanisms, it has had an impact on the pausing in the construction industry, but then also from the fiscal side, which was still on the previous slide, but I'll just talk to it quickly. The fiscal position has been profoundly affected through two transmission channels. As departments, all of us had to reprioritize our budgets towards fighting the pandemic. And as a result, infrastructure spend has also suffered. Now, you may recall during the presentation to the latter part of May to the Committee on COVID-19, and I will just reflect on it a little bit again, how the department also had to reprioritize its operations towards assisting in the fight against COVID. And then, of course, we've seen budgetary cuts. And we've seen, for example, a 160 million cut in the road maintenance grant that has come to be. So we've seen both a reorganization within the project portfolio as a result of reprioritization, where we've seen a net increase in projects, but these have not necessarily resulted in a larger work creation opportunity as we've moved away from large projects, which we couldn't sustain over multiple financial years, into smaller projects. Part of the reason lie, of course, in the nature of infrastructure, where the budgetary certainty does not fit neatly into a single financial year, but you need to be able to pull it across a number of financial years. And that's the nature of multi-year projects. Where budgetary certainty is questionable, the department is cautious because the last thing we want to do is go out to tender and not be able to deliver on it. We can ill afford to set the private sector up for failure. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So in the presentation that we did to the committee in May, we highlighted how certain actions that we had to take as part of our contribution to the fight against COVID has impacted on our performance. Now, the next couple of slides, there are 5 in total, doesn't reflect the performance in our APP. So it's not part and parcel of validated performance that we present in this quarter, but I think it's important that we just highlight it. So we spoke about last time when we met the committee in May, we spoke about Q&I and how the department assisted the Department of Health in the suppression strategy. And we just give some figures there that are set in time. And that time frame being the 17th of June. And we've seen how from a red dot, and you can continue on the slides if you don't mind, to one where it starts departmental performance. We've seen how within the Q&I side, within the red dot, how we've mobilized our initiative to assist HealthNet and augment their capacity in the transportation of patients to and from Q&I facilities, as well as then the introduction of Red Dot Light, which assisted healthcare workers to get home after the evening shifts because you might recall during that stage, transport operating hours were regulated until 7 o'clock in the evening. So while these few slides do not reflect the validated data per the end of June and thus form part of the Q1 performance reporting per se, the reason we flagged is actually twofold. One, to underscore that performance happened outside of the context of APP performance tables, and two, highlight and underscore some of the reasons for deviation from set targets due to change in operational focus. So you would have seen the last slide of those 5 was, for example, highlighting what was happening in the provincial traffic services space, where we've seen, because of provincial traffic being part and parcel of the integrated roadblock regime together with SAPS and the SANDF, a lot of what happened in the operational environment was affected by that. We've seen the closing of way bridges, where we've provided also for in that space for roadblocks, or had to mobilize our resources towards the integrated roadblock approach. We've seen the suspension of the breathalyzer device, and of course we've seen a number of other operations being affected. But that then brings us to our departmental performance. Now again, the context that we have here is that some of this performance is reflected directly as a result of the construction industry having paused for a significant part of this quarter, but also that there were challenges in the reporting framework, where the reporting network was not open for reporting, or where data was congregation that happened from a national, provincial and local level, where data capturers were working from home, didn't have access to the type of systems to actually capture the data that was required. If we can move to the next slide. So we're looking at program 2, public works infrastructure. I think if we can just move one more slide, Mr. Kutsia. Honourable Chairperson, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. van Schalkwyk, we can. Mr. Kutsia, if you could move one more slide. I think that was the request.
That is so, Honourable Chairperson. I can already start talking about. So what the approach that we've taken here was also just reflect a few slides before we get to the performance table, and that is just to provide a little bit of context. So before we get to the actual performance table, we thought it would be prudent to just highlight a few projects specifically planned and executed in a way that advances important social economic objectives, including spending specified portions of the contract budgets on targeted contractors, local labour and training of labour, so District 6 Community Healthcare Centre, and projects such as those. We're just flagging them here because it is also important that we highlight some of these aspects that are not necessarily in the performance tables per se. We can move to the performance table itself, where you would have seen that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas, of which all of them have been impacted by what has happened in the COVID-19 space. The first one, the number of EPWP work opportunities created by public works. The reason for 201% overperformance is that there wasn't a target set for the quarter. However, 201 jobs were created. So one job equals 1%, and that's why that dynamic is represented in that way. On the number of infrastructure designs ready for tender, we've seen some scope changes and budget reprioritization that delayed the compilation of the tender set. So there's an underperformance there. On the number of capital infrastructure projects completed, we've seen a number of those completed that's over and above what was planned. It's a pull through from the previous quarter as well. And And we've seen the number of planned maintenance projects being on 100 and the number of planned maintenance projects completed. We've seen that COVID-19 has impacted again on the construction industry and the delay, and the revised construction program and the health and safety plans that had to be put in place has further delayed until what time everything could get up and running. Within the transport infrastructure, which is the next program 3, here with the challenge that we've had here on the 23rd March, of course, we had the national lockdown starting on the 26th, level 5, and on the level 5 construction was prohibited. 1 May, we saw a lowering to level 4, and within that, we've seen some parts of the construction industry being opened up, but under very stringent safety protocols. And again, there was a delay in the manner in which everything could get on board. And of course, we've seen when a COVID positive case has been identified in a workplace, you have to decontaminate that workplace, leading to further delays. The biggest challenge that we have had here is due to the decongregation, the work from home, data and systems connectivity, on-site COVID closure, etc. Data capturing has been severely affected. And we expect some of this data capturing challenges to manifest still in Q2 as well. So as a result, validated data is not yet available for the EPWP side. The EPWP reporting system has at times been open and at times been closed as well. So we've had some major challenges in that regard. So the reason you don't see any performance reflected here, apart from the maintenance project, that 2 maintenance projects that were completed on time, has to do with the reporting system and the capturing of data. If we can move to transport operations. And in this space, again, we've seen that underperformance due to COVID-19, and specifically when we get to the number of trips subsidized. We've seen the restrictions imposed through the national regulations and directions, restricting public transport operating hours. These restrictions have resulted in reduced trips that the operator gaps could operate in terms of the interim contract. So that is what has led to the underperformance there. We also have a next slide that just shows some pictures, and what has happened here was just to show also that it has played itself out also in our safety initiatives, where some of the projects that we wanted to actually complete in Q4 has been pushed into Q1. And this is mostly around Swartland municipality and some of the initiatives that are run within the Provincial Sustainable Transport Plan, safety initiatives, creating a safe environment, moving between our schools and playing fields between our schools and other facilities as well. Within Program 5, Transport Regulation, we've seen while the hearings could not take place due to COVID-19 regulations, adjudication of new applications were actually completed remotely, and all the required documentation was submitted, and physical sittings was not required. The number of vehicles weighed, of course, I've alluded to that at the start with the closure of the weighbridges. We saw basically all weighbridge operations being suspended under level 5 and 4. Were only reopened last week of May 2020, and then it was only opened for operating 12 hours, 5 days a week. And we've seen the number of traffic law enforcement operations conducted. Also not meeting the exact target, and I alluded to that right at the start when I said there were a number of operations that we had to engage in that fall outside of our APP framework, but that resulted in actually an impact on our overall performance. Provincial traffic being deployed for the purposes that it has been deployed, of course, being a case in point. Program 6, community-based programs, again, as in the same, within especially the hotspot areas, we had data capturing challenges. basically exacerbated by temporary and unplanned closures of staff facilities as staff tested positive. Many capturers also did not have adequate resources to capture performance from home. We will, of course, pick this up as we go along in Q2. Within government motor transport, we've seen that the indicator there is very much a demand-driven indicator. Performance was, of course, negatively impacted by lockdown regulations, and what has transpired is that the technical assistance performed vehicle inspections as and when required, and basically through a system of rotation and on-call basis. So, Chairperson, that brings me towards the end of the presentation, overall reflection of the context that informed performance, of the performance and the challenges pertaining to it, what has impacted directly on it, the cause and effect, and also the challenges that we had within the data capturing environment that impacted on what are we able to present today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. van Schalkwyk. Members, I'm going to follow the same process, the line of questioning like we did, excuse me, in the first presentation. So if you could please limit your questions to 3 in round 1, there will then be an opportunity for follow-ups, and then I will hand over for a round 2 if you have any additional questions. So I see Honourable van der Westhuizen, Honourable America in round 1. Members, if you could please and then Honourable Dagmore, is that a hand or not? Yes, it is a hand, and then Honourable Dagmore. Members, if you could, in the interest of the presenter, just indicate the page number of the presentation when you pose your questions. Honourable van der Westhuizen, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And unfortunately, I haven't got the page number. I just know it was the last one. If I could start with that one regarding government transport. Or perhaps I must just interrupt myself and say, I understand that when you set these targets, the world was a completely different place. And I also believe that if we expect of the public service to be nimble and to adjust to changing circumstances, then we cannot now come and hold you to targets that were set and that you've not been able to meet. And I accept that, and I trust that there have been a lot of other work and other achievements that have not been measured in terms of these targets. 3 questions. The first one, my expectation is that the demand for government transport will be dramatically lowered as more and more people work from home, as more and more people don't believe they should be physically present when they have to engage with somebody else. So have you taken that into consideration also, for example, with the policy on the replacement of the government fleet, etc.? The second one is you've referred on a few occasions to backlogs in data capturing. And I would like to know, what is the current situation now that many of the staff have returned, but I presume there are also quite a number of staff members who are still working from home. And then my last question, are there still staff members with comorbidities or, who are being self-quarantined or something like that are not gainfully employed because they don't perhaps have a laptop, or they haven't been issued with a data dongle or something like that? And if there are such staff, what percentage of the staff complement are still not back in the office or still not gainfully employed? Not necessarily not back in the office, if they work productively from home, if you could give us an indication in that regard.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Honourable America.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable van der Westhuizen did my preamble, so I'll go straight into the questions. Thank you, Mr. van Schalkwyk, for the presentation. My first question relates to slide 18, the last indicator about the maintenance of infrastructure, program 2. I understand that due to the lockdown that, brought about this under sort of performance. The question is, are there measures put in place now that could, catch up with this sort of backlog that exists in terms of maintenance, and which areas are the most critical infrastructure maintenance that will be given priority? Second question, Chair. I would well imagine that the indicator, the number of subsidies, trips to gaps is dependent on the number of trips. I would well imagine that would be a demand-driven indicator. So less trips by gaps would then result in less subsidies paid, and less subsidies paid would be a retention of revenue that could possibly augment the revenue shortfalls in other areas that were affected by lockdown. And then lastly, Chair, they cannot recall which particular slide. It's a weighing of vehicles. To my knowledge, throughout the lockdown, the number of vehicles that normally qualify and are being sort of inspected and weighed have not been reduced on our roads. What resulted in this underweighing or the number of vehicles that being underweighed or not weighed during this particular quarter? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable America. Honourable Dagmore.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, arising from the overall report for this quarter, there has been quite a lot of reporting about the success of the Red Dot Transport Initiative. I would just like to ask if there's anyone from the department that could explain and talk about to what extent the taxi industry was involved and benefited and still continues to benefit in regard to the Red Dot initiative. And then I would just like to ask, there's obviously the department has been one of the departments that during this period has been involved in procurement of PPE. And I note that in regard to other information released by the MEC for Finance, that Tusk Construction Support Services, received the bulk, provided the bulk of procurement to this department. Could I just get clarity possibly from those involved in supply chain? Was the Tusk Construction Support Services already on the database of the Western Cape Provincial Government? And if you could just give us a sense of the ownership structure of this company and the directors, if that's possible. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That is round one. Advocate Reinecke, I will hand over to you, and you can delegate how you feel redirect the questions to who you feel needs to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because during Mr. America's questions, I lost signal. So what I did manage to get, and just correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the question from Mr. America with regards to less subsidies versus less kilometers. Am I correct? My deepest apologies. The
Sure.
That's not a problem. That's not a problem, Advocate Reinecke. I will provide Honourable America an opportunity to pose his question again in his words so that we don't misconstrue the information is required.
Shall I proceed, Chair?
Yes, you may. Yes, please proceed.
Thank you, Advocate Reineke, and thank you, Chair. Related to the last question or the last input of Advocate Reineke, around the subsidies of GABs, I wanted to know that the indicator, and then maybe I might just be wrong, but you will correct me, I'm sure, that due to the lockdown and the restrictions around the lockdown in terms of passenger transport, GABs undertook less trips, therefore less subsidies have been paid to them. Now, I wanted to know whether that particular indicator is a demand-driven indicator. If the demand is not there, then there will be an underperformance of the indicator. And then wouldn't we consider that to be a positive thing in the sense that less subsidies being paid and more money will be available to augment areas that suffered a shortfall of revenue as a result of the lockdown? The second question I asked was that in terms of slide 18, program 2, infrastructure maintenance, it's a relative underperformance, and understand that underperformance is as a result of the lockdown, but the significant backlog that has arisen out of the lockdown. What measures are in place to catch up with the lockdown, and what are priority areas of maintenance that need to be considered when trying to meet the backlog? And then lastly, the weighing of vehicles, the underperformance with result to the weighing of vehicles throughout the lockdowns. There was no restrictions on the movement of goods and around the country. What resulted in, is there a redeployment of personnel? Because certainly the infrastructure is there, therefore the indicator is there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable America. Advocate Reineke.
Thank you. Can I just start then with the Mr. America's questions, and then I will redirect some of the other questions to other colleagues. So, if we start, for example, with the question of subsidies. The issue of subsidies, if you, for example, look at our indicators, you will see that less trips doesn't mean less kilometers subsidized. In actual fact, we've overachieved on the kilometers subsidized because it's a standard within the industry that you do not only pay for this kilometers operated, but you also will pay standing kilometers if a vehicle is standing for as a result of something outside of your control. And COVID and the regulations were definitely outside of Golden Arrow's control. So with the result, in terms of our contacts, we definitely had to still subsidize standing kilometers, and that you will find sort of throughout the industry, and I'm sure Member Heron will tell you that happens also in the My City space. So it didn't necessarily translate to less kilometers. However, you do not pay for the full you don't pay the full kilometer rate for subsidized services. So the result is that it doesn't necessarily translate the fact that Golden Arrow didn't operate the full services, that there would be money left over. In actual fact, it was considered prudent to enter into a discussion with Golden Arrow with regards to a fair revenue subsidy. So, for example, Golden Arrow itself did not were only allowed, for example, to have a percentage of people within their vehicles. 50% at times, 70% at other times, and so forth, depending on the regulations. Well, the result is that the fair revenue lost by Golden Arrow was significant enough to put Golden Arrow under. So to adhere, to ensure that Golden Arrow adhered to the regulations and so forth, we entered into discussions with Golden Arrow, and we revised the contract to allow for a fair revenue subsidy to ensure that Golden Arrow made it out of this crisis being sustainable, because the downside obviously would have been is that Golden Arrow would have gone under, and that would have a massive impact on the commuter itself. So the long and short of that answer is that there wasn't any additional revenue to be used for any other purposes. But then with regards to the weighing of vehicles, that is absolutely true, Member America, that we, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, sort of. We had to redeploy our traffic officers to adhere to sort of the national approach to roadblocks. There were 13 roadblocks, and which was operated 24/7 during lockdown, and our traffic officers were redeployed to be there 24/7. So we sort of had to find resources, and the best way of finding resources at that point in time was to close down some of our weighbridges and redeploy some of our people there. There was a significant drop in the movement of goods, and so the redeployment was thought, it was thought better to redeploy them to the and work together with SAPS to the roadblocks itself, the 13 roadblocks itself. Also alternative, just to mention as well, that some of the weighbridges, we did utilize those areas for other roadblocks as well, and for other sort of initiatives like searching and so forth of vehicles and so forth. But the priorities during COVID had shifted, and we had started to concentrate on the movement of people without permits, etc., and so forth. And that's why there wasn't, for example, necessarily or why there was a drop in vehicles weight. Then with regards to the Red Dot initiative, before I ask Mrs. Rabana to come in, just to say that this is the Red Dot initiative is an initiative with Santaco. It started off with an agreement entered into between Santaco and ourselves. And a formalized company was then set up. And so it is the taxi industry. A company was set up by the taxi industry, and a contract was entered into between ourselves and the taxi industry to provide the services needed for Red Dot, both Red Dot and Red Dot Lite. I don't know if that answers your question, but if you want additional detail, I can ask Mrs. Rabana to give sort of more detail. But the Red Dot initiative is split into two parts. The one is to provide transport of people between quarantine and isolation facilities, and the other part is to assist with the transporting of health workers from their work location to their home in the evenings. You have to recall that during the regulations, taxis were not allowed to operate after a particular period of time, leaving these health workers stranded. And so the Red Dot initiative assisted with them as well. If there is any further detail, I'll ask then Mrs. Rabana to come in. And then I'm going to ask the CFO to come in and to answer some of the questions, particularly, okay, well, before I ask her to come in, my apologies, can I ask Yasir to come in about the GMT and the expected demand around transport and the expected drop? Yasir?
Thank you, Advocate Reyneke. Chair, on the question that was asked by Member van der Westhuizen, yes, indeed, the demand for GMT vehicles during the hard lockdown was substantially lower, to the tune of something like 30%. We saw a 30% reduction in demand for GMT vehicles, and that was during April and some parts of May. But I can say that that has steadily started to pick up again, bearing in mind that many departments are taking into account social distancing, and whereas vehicles in the past, and particularly during lockdowns level 4 and 3, departments were starting to get back to normal operations, but they were allowing their staff to have fewer passengers in vehicles. So they were either requesting bigger vehicles, which GMT is now looking at procuring, or they were requesting additional vehicles for transport services. GMT is taking that into account. There will, of course, be some impact on our revenue projections, but we are taking that into our stride and looking at just revising our projections for the remainder of the year, and also looking at additional services that we can offer our clients. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. And then I would ask our CFO to come in on two issues. One, with regards to the maintenance issues, and number two, with regards to the PPE.
Thank you, through you, Chair. In respect of the maintenance relating to Program 2, yes, there has been measures put in place. Those measures, amongst other things, and the members must remember, during hard lockdown, construction in respect of essential services to respond to COVID were allowed. So in the health sector, for health maintenance and construction work, there was still work going on, but not in relation to schools or general facilities or even for roads. So in respect of those, what the measures that has been put in place is that we have already during last year procured management contractors for each area in Program 2, in other words, for works health, for works education, and for general infrastructure. That is capable, and those management contractors are capable of doing work to unlimited amounts. They are grade 9 contractors. Then we have framework agreements specifically focused on maintenance in respect of each class of work for all areas to respond to maintenance. The key priority areas is, of course, schools for us at this point. Addressing maintenance is a result of vandalism particularly, as well as weather events during this period. And then, of course, our own buildings, maintenance of our own buildings, and then the ongoing servicing of health infrastructure in respect of maintenance. As far as general infrastructure is concerned, members must also just take note that what has happened in that space is we needed to reprioritize a large portion of their budget towards and redirect that towards deep cleaning and decontamination of buildings in response to COVID positive incidents across the portfolio. Then in respect of the question relating to PPE, was task already on the database of the Western Cape? Yes. In respect of the ownership, Chair, I did not prepare for the ownership question or bring that information. However, we do have it and we can submit it via the Secretariat by close of business tomorrow. That's easy enough to do. And I think that responded to all of the questions for myself. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and then there's just one outstanding question as far as I can see. It is the question on the comorbidities and the work from home, and I'm going to ask Gerard van Schalkwyk to just respond.
Thank you, Advocate Reyneke. An honourable member, I don't have the percentages with me. What we can do is furnish you with that. The latest statistics that we do have is that we have 455 employees that are vulnerable. We have 253 employees that are full-time basis at the office. 881 work on a rotational basis, and around about 158 work staggered hours. The total employees that we have that are working from home are around about 547, and those that are at home but might not have all of the means to be productively employed are 317. I don't have the specific details as to what their specific circumstances would be, but suffice to say that what we have moved from is a situation where we have looked at the number of employees with comorbidities, see to what extent we can enable them to perform their duties, and to see to what extent we can protect our employees from COVID and the risk of transmission. So what we can do is we can follow up, if you don't mind, through the Secretariat with those percentages. But just to point out that, just to give you an indication, from week 7 to week 24, we moved from 790 employees working at home basically to 317. So it's a significant drop as we go through the various stages of easing the regulations and creating safe working environments. So that is where we are at the moment, Honourable Member.
Chair, I think that's all the questions, unless we've missed any.
Chair?
Honourable Dugmore, is that a point of clarity or
just a point of clarity. My reception hasn't been great, but I can't recall a detailed response to the question I asked about the TUS construction. I'm sorry if I missed something, but I don't recall a clear answer given about that question.
The CFO did in fact respond to you, Honourable Dugmore, and the request was that with regards to your second part of the question, that the information will be submitted to the Secretariat by close of business tomorrow, but we will formally write to the department to get that all additional information.
My apologies for that. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Honourable members, are there any follow-up questions with regards to the answers that have been provided? I see Honourable van der Westhuizen and Honourable America.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the response to the government transport and the demand for government transport. To be quite honest, while I trust the answer, I am a little bit disappointed because I was hoping that people would not now be asking for bigger vehicles due to social distancing, but that people would be able to adjust the way in which they work, in that the demand for government transport would also decrease, as we found in other places that the demand for office space, etc., has, for example, decreased. And my question is just, do you foresee such a decrease in long-term demand? And secondly, Chair, I'm just wondering, and I'm raising this amongst us as members, whether we shouldn't perhaps be suggesting a drive for people to make less use of government transport and rather adjust the way in which they operate, in which they meet one another, etc. I just think that, you know, we need to work smarter, and this is a potential where we can make a small contribution to the congestion on our roads, but also where we can, I believe, save a lot of money for the provincial administration, because, you know, I just believe that this thing of providing transport to all officials to go all over the show is a huge burden on the provincial budget. So do you foresee in the long run a decrease in the demand for that?
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Honourable America.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Advocate Reinecker, for clarifying the question around Golden Arrow. It's not specifically mentioned in the presentation, but it is related to the paying of subsidies. I know during the early phases of the lockdown, there was severe restrictions on movements, on vehicular traffic on our roads. My question, and you need not to respond to it, but if you do, I'll appreciate it, relates to the subsidies paid to the concession holder of the Chapman's Peak toll road. How was that affected by the lockdown? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, are there any additional follow-up questions? All right. If not, Advocate Reinecker, if I can then hand back to you. Honourable Dagmo, I took it upon myself to answer the second part of your question, but I don't know if you heard the first part of the question, whether the construction company was in fact on the database, but let me not to speak on behalf of the department, and I will allow the CFO then to just answer that question to you due to technical issues you had.
Chair, can I just say, I just wanted to ask, you were asking if there were follow-up questions, but then in the beginning of the meeting, you said you'd have a second round. I've actually got a new question here.
Okay, now I will provide you with this second opportunity. All right, Advocate Reinecker.
Thank you. I think with regards to the concessions and subsidies relating to Chapman's Peak, Chair, I would ask that you allow us an opportunity to respond after this meeting. I think we haven't prepared to respond on this issue per se. I'll just ask Mr. Fourie first. Maybe Mr. Fourie could assist, but if there are any sort of numbers required, I think Mr. Fourie would probably would want to go and verify before responding comprehensively. But Len, do you want to come in and assist with that question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, through you. Obviously, we were not prepared. You know, this is an annual performance plan, and I didn't expect a question like that. So the information can be given. As far as the agreement with Chapman's Peak is concerned, I think Mr. Pillay, who is also in the meeting, actually knows more about it than myself, in all honesty. But in short, yes, our agreement with the concessionaire is that you know, we will stand in for certain events that they do not have a control over, you know, and that actually what has happened, or the short answer is that we expect that because of the lockdown and because of the virus, the state of emergency, we will have to pay considerably more for Chapman's Peak in the current year than our contribution towards the the running of the concession will be considerably more than we have budgeted for. I do not have the exact amount because obviously it also changes as the regulations and the state of emergency changes, but we do have estimates and we can provide that information to the committee if needed.
All right, thank you very much for that.
Sorry, and then I think Mr. van der Westhuizen expressed disappointment in the manner in which the use of GMT vehicles. And I was wondering if Yasir, if you could just come in and speak a little bit about our plans to lessen the use of vehicles.
Thank you very much, Advocate Reineke, and thank you very much for the question, Member van der Westhuizen. In GMT's, through you, Chair, in GMT's strategy, even before lockdown, we had indicated that we would want GMT's vehicles to be used more efficiently and more effectively. So in a sense, almost wanting to reduce the use of our vehicles on behalf of clients, not forcing them, but trying to get addressing, as the member said, the problems with congestion, but also reducing carbon emissions through fewer kilometers being traveled. But bear in mind that we still have vehicles that have to be on the road, like our ambulances, health net vehicles, provincial traffic vehicles, that take up a large chunk of the total number of kilometers that are traveled by GMT vehicles. But in my earlier answer, I also said that GMT is, in terms of our new strategy, looking at new and additional services, and that would include, for example, a shuttle service that we would offer to clients, pooling of vehicles or ride sharing, and that would go hand in hand with technology that we are looking to introduce in GMT that would make it possible for our clients to be able to access those types of services. So instead of one person driving in a car, if there are two or more officials from different departments that need to go, for instance, to training at Kromeria, and those two officials live close to each other, that GMT would be in a position through technology to put those two clients in contact with one another so that we can achieve ride sharing. So that is in line with our new strategy. I think COVID-19 and the lockdown was possibly a catalyst for many of these types of technological innovations to be fast-tracked. And we are looking at that technology now and speeding up the development of the technology that would allow us to have clients use the vehicles more efficiently, and in that way reduce the number of kilometers required by being agile and innovative on behalf of the clients. I hope, Member van der Westhuizen, that answers the question, but if you would like to have a more detailed discussion, I'll be glad to explain a bit more. Thank you, Chair.
I think that answers the questions, Chair.
Right, thank you. Honourable American van der Westhuizen, if there's any additional information you require, we can do that in our discussions at the end of this meeting during our deliberations. I'm now going to open for a second round of questions, and I see Honourable Dugmore.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, thanks. It was good to get a report on the progress regarding the consolidation of government motor transport in Maitland, and mention made about locating Ruland Street, Hope Street, and Pardon Island there. I just wanted to ask, given the current debate about reversing apartheid spatial planning, looking at our assets and whether we can use those to reverse that. Whether the department has had any discussion or thought about, like in the case of Tafelberg initially, when Human Settlements indicated the desire to develop that for social housing, whether there is consideration being given to develop Ruland Street and Hope Street once the move is complete. You know, are those buildings then going to become available, and could they be considered for use for social housing? Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there any further questions for round 2? All right, if not, Advocate Reiniger.
Look, I think that we definitely came prepared to deal with the issues around Q1 and not necessarily to talk about issues on social housing. Can I ask that we be given an opportunity to look at the question itself, to understand what spaces Member Dugmore is speaking about, and to give an informed response rather than to speak off the cuff?
That is in order with me. We will, we as a committee, write to you or to the department officially for a presentation on all these additional questions raised by the members. Honourable Dugmore, is that in order with you?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the issue that we would like I would like the department to consider is, given the presentation that, and I'm talking about Ruland Street and Hope Street in particular, are going to be consolidated in Maitland, does that then mean that once that has happened, those particular facilities will then not have another client? Or is there some component of government motor transport that would remain behind, or literally would those two facilities be relocated in full to the Maitland building, making those available? And then if so, what is the department's view on whether those properties could assist in reversing apartheid spatial planning by using them for social housing? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Honourable Dugmore. I think your comment has been noted. We will, like I said, officially request a presentation on that, if that is in order. Advocate Reiniger.
That would be appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, are there any additional questions based on Q1, the presentation? All right, if not, Advocate Reiniger, to you and the department, thank you very much for the presentations today. Thank you for the manner in which we could engage, and thank you for your openness in responding to the various questions posed by the members. You're more than welcome to leave the meeting now. Members, if you would just remain behind so we can deal with the committee administration.
Thank you, Chair. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Mr. Kutsia, if you could please put on the screen the minutes of the meeting of the 25th of August for adoption.
Will do so.
Thank you. So you can see, I think you shared the wrong screen.
Is it visible, Chairperson?
It is visible, but it's very small.
Yes,
Members, can you all see?
Yeah, I can see, Chair.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Kutsia. Members, I'm officially tabling page 1 for any edits or amendments. Page 2, any edits or amendments? If no edits or amendments, I'll officially table the minutes for adoption. If I could get a proposer.
Yeah, I propose that we adopt the minutes.
Thank you, Honourable Van der Westhuizen and America. All right, members, there's been a lot of additional information required or requested through the presentation as presented today. With your indulgence, can I ask that we go away from this meeting, and that if you have any additional information that you require, that by close of business on Thursday, the 10th of September, in writing, request that the information that you would require be sent to Mr. Kutsia, CC'd to myself as the chair, for us then to do one consolidated request to the department, so that it's not just random requests going through to the department, if that is in order.
In order, Chair.
All right, then that's it from my side. Thank you very much, members. The meeting is now adjourned.
It's a wrap. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair.